have enough brains and courage and strength to stand up for themselves and not allow this stupidity to continue, so that another life of a soldier or a citizen isn't, God forbid, taken from us in such a tragic and terrible way. May His Neshama have an aliyah.
Amen.
We'll begin our class now, so I'm going to mute everybody. I will allow you to unmute yourselves. If you have a question and you need to interrupt, you can. If not, then we can wait to the end where we always do questions and answers. I want to again welcome everybody, wish everybody a Chag Sameach, a Lag BaOmer Sameach. Lag BaOmer is a day of tremendous blessings. It's a day when literally brachos and blessings are flowing from heaven, and we just have to become a keli, we just have to be a vessel to receive those blessings. Excuse me. Sorry, I did a lot of singing yesterday. I'm a little bit, lost my voice a little bit. Just the thought about Lag BaOmer. Everybody, most of you know the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, how he had to run away from the Romans, and he and his son were in a cave, and they actually were quarantined in a cave, didn't see another human being for 12 years. During that time in the cave, the level of spirituality that they reached was beyond what anyone could imagine here on this earth, which is why, as we know, when they walked out, they walked into a field, and as they were gazing on different things, it says that Rabbi Elazar would gaze at something, and he would see it, and from his eyes would come a fire and would set it afire and would burn it. He looked at a field, and he burnt the field. He looked at a man who was planting in the field, and literally consumed the guy with fire and burnt him alive. A baskol, a voice came from heaven and said, "Is this why I allowed you to leave the cave after 12 years? Is that the purpose? So that you could go and destroy my world? I'd rather you go back in the cave." In fact, it says that everything that Rabbi Elazar damaged, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai looked with his eyes of kindness, not severity, and healed and brought back to life. Even the person who was killed from the fire was brought back to life, Tchias HaMesim, resurrected from the dead by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But they went back into the cave. And in that last year in the cave, they learned Torah at a different level. Not from a perspective of heaven, but from a perspective of earth. We look back to the Parshias of Acharemos and Kedoshim, and we find the famous story of the sons of Aharon. Aaron had 4 sons. 2 of his sons perished. They were Nadav and Avihu. Why did they perish? The Torah tells us that it describes that they brought an offering. They brought a korban to Hashem, a ketores. It was an unauthorized, unsanctioned offering, and that's why they died. It's hinted to the idea that perhaps they were also under the influence of alcohol, that they had drank wine in order to reach a certain level, and that's why they died. Ultimately, though, the description that the Torah says is Bekar vasam lifnei Hashem vayamusu, as they came close to God and they died. And what does that mean? That means that they set out on a journey for the very innermost part of their soul to reach God, and to reach God at a level that was godly and spiritual without physicality. It was a soul journey. They accomplished it. They reached the highest of levels, and the crescendo of reaching that level was the performance of this korban to Hashem. The problem with their journey is their journey did not have an exit strategy. There was no exit strategy. They were reaching toward the levels of paradise, the levels of paradise of the heavenly abodes. And they were reaching so far that they were drawn in by the fiery essence of godliness, and they couldn't pull themselves out. And their souls literally fused with godliness and left their bodies. It's called kalus hanefesh, that their souls simply came to an end of physical life because they were so drawn to the spirituality that they had reached through this journey. It was because of their coming close, also through this offering of the incense, that's why they died. The problem is that that's not our purpose in life. Our purpose in life is not to have our souls return to our Maker. Our purpose in life is to have our souls enclosed in a body that can perform mitzvahs and that can elevate the world physically. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar, after 12 years in a cave, couldn't relate to the physical world. The very idea of their body was meaningless to them. They were only souls, so to speak. And when they came out, and Rabbi Elazar saw a Jew with a holy neshama, but he was bending down and he was farming. What do you farm with? You farm with fertilizer. He said, how could a holy Jew, the holy body that encloses the holy soul, the holy neshama, how could a Jew possibly mire himself in this disgusting dirt to do physical labor? He's a Jew. He should be engrossed completely in the spirit of service of God. And that's why he looked at him with such severity, and that's why fire came from his eyes. And they spent the last year understanding that, no, that is the very purpose of life. Hashem put a soul into a body for the purpose of getting into the physical world, because only in the physical world we can perform mitzvahs. Without a physical world, we cannot perform a mitzvah. It's simply impossible. So it's not about our soul. It's about the enclothing of the soul into the body. And it's then, and only then, that we find that the person has reached the proper level of the purpose of creation. And that's what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had to realize together with his son. And then a year later, they came back out from the cave. This very cave behind me that we're showing you, this is the cave that they lived in. This is the cave that ultimately they exited. That was the touch of Lag BaOmer. We'll do one more touch of Lag BaOmer before we finish on into the rest of davening. And we'll do a sidetrack and we'll look at the counting of the Omer. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to have to find the page. So if page 10 is 34, then page 136 has got to be 24 pages later, 156, 160 maybe. Let's see if that works, if my math works. Let's go to page 160 here. Hold on. Lost that for a moment. Like I said, I'm doing a little bit of everything today, so it's going to take just a little longer. 160. My math is not even close because it's dealing with the English as well. So then let's go to 403 something. Gotta go before. Okay, just before this. Here we go. Now we're in business. Okay. Let's just take a look for a minute. Since this class is all about davening and the siddur, I know we're mostly dealing with the going through the chakras, but I wanted to take a look at the counting of the Omer, and I wanted to show you some interesting things about the counting of the Omer itself. Okay? Now, as you know, the Torah tells us, "Usfartem lachem macharat Shabbat," that we have to count the Omer, that every night, beginning the second night of Pesach, we start counting a total of 49 days, or up to 50 days. And upon the completion of the counting of the 50 days, or when we get to the 50th day, we completed the 49 days, it's at that time that we finally reach the holiday of Shavuos. How do we count the Omer? What's it all about? So as you know, we recite the blessing, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfiras ha'omer. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, that you sanctified us. He sanctified us with his mitzvahs, and he commanded us on the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Once we say the blessing, we then recite the actual counting. So on the first night, which was the second night of Pesach, the first night of the counting of the Omer, we would have said, Hayom Yom Echad LaOmer. Today is day one of the Omer. On the second day, we would have said Hayom Shnei Yomim LaOmer. Today is day two of the Omer. Now you'll notice that as we get to day number 7, we would then have said Hayom Shiva Yamim. Today is 7 days. Shehem Shavua Echad LaOmer, which is 1 week in the Omer. Why are we doing that? Because the Torah doesn't only say to count up to 50 days. It also says that you should count 7 weeks. So in order to fulfill the mitzvah properly, we need to count both days and weeks. Hence, once we get to a week, we say how many days and how many weeks it is. Now, technically speaking, what we do is we don't only do that on the 7th day, but you'll look, when we get to the 8th day, what do we do? On the 8th day, we say Hayom Shmona Yamim. Today is the 8th day. Shehem Shavua Echad, which is 1 week. B'Yom Echad LaOmer, and a day in the Omer. So it's a week and a day. And then the next day we say it's the 9th day, it's a week and 2 days. It's the 10th day, it's a week and 3 days, etc. If a person, let's just say on the 9th day, said Hayom Tish'a Yamim, today is the 9th day of the Omer, and forgot to mention the weeks, they still fulfilled the mitzvah. But if a person on day 7 or day 14 or day 21 didn't mention the weeks, they did not fulfill the mitzvah. Because, for example, we get to day 14, Hayom Arba Asar Yom, today is the 14th day, Shem Shnei Shavuot LaOmer, which is 2 weeks of the Omer. When you get to the actual completion of the week, then it must be actually counted. The in-between days, we're supposed to count it. If you missed it, it's okay. If it's not an in-between day, then it actually must be counted. Okay, now I want to go back and look at some weird stuff in the counting of the Omer. I'm sure you've seen this thousands of times. You say, Hayom Yom Echad LaOmer, right? You're done. If you know a little bit more, then you go ahead 2 or 3 pages, and you get to this part where, when you get to this part, you say, hold on, please. And then you say the rest of it, the Harachamon and the Yana B'Koach and the Ribbono Shel Olam, and there's also a Lam Natseach there. Let me see if I can find that. Down here, we had the Harachamon and Lam Natseach and the rest of it. But my question to you is, as we go back now to the page of the first day of the counting of the Omer, let's take a look here and see. We said Hayom Yom Echad LaOmer. Today is the first day of the Omer. What is the rest of this fine print, that little yud, and those little words? What is all of this about? That's the question. And the answer to that is they're each representing something completely different. So for starters, you have right on top of the day of the Omer, it says Hayom Yom Echad LaOmer. Today's the first day of the Omer. It tells you that the first day of the Omer is Or Lites Zayin Nisan. That's the eve of the 16th of Nisan. That's when we count it. Not every siddur has that, by the way. Some siddurim don't bother telling you the date, but when they did the new version of the annotated siddur, they thought it might be helpful for them to add a date. And so they added the date for you. Okay, fine. What's the rest of this stuff? We have Chesed Shebechesed. What's that? Well, for starters, and I'm not going to go into the details of it now, I'm just going to tell you briefly for those that aren't already familiar. There are the 10 midos, okay? The 10 spheros with which God created the world, okay? And there are also 10 attributes of God, and there are also 10 attributes that each person has as well, because we're created in the image of God. The first 3 are what are known as the intellectual attributes, and they are Chachma, Bina, and Da'as. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Not going to explain what they are exactly today. Then come the 7 emotive ones. The 7 emotive ones are Chesed, kindness, Gvura, strength, Tiferes, beauty, Netzach, endurance, Hod, splendor, Yesod, foundation, and Malchus, sovereignty. I'm not going to explain what those are all about today. That's going to be a separate class before Shavuos, where we'll go into all of those things. And there are 49 days of the Omer. There are 7 emotive, I'm sorry, 1 second, please. There are 7 emotive attributes. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. Within each of the 7 attributes, there are 7 aspects of that attribute. Because within Chesed, there's Chesed Shebechesed, there's Gvura Shebechesed, there's Tiferes Shebechesed, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus Shebechesed. So within Chesed, there's all 7 aspects of Chesed. Within Gvura, there's Chesed Shebegvura, Gevura shebegvura, and there's 7 aspects of each midah, of each attribute, of each aspect. In all in, there are 49 different attributes. Between one and the other, and each intertwined with the next, it equals a total of 49. Each day of the counting of the Omer is representative of one such element of our personality, of what we're working on, trying to elevate ourselves in preparation for Shavuos. So, for example, on the first day of the Omer, we're working on chesed shebechesed, kindness within kindness. Not explaining what that means now. On the second day of the Omer, we're working on gevura shebechesed, strength within kindness. Okay? On the third day of the Omer, that's the day representative of Tiferes Shebechesed. And throughout all 49 days, we'll find that each day is representative of another aspect, another attribute within the 7 emotive attributes. Because there are a total of 49 categories within the 7 emotive attributes. So each day, it tells us what it is. And later, within the prayers, it's going to let us know. We're going to actually add it in. If you take a look here, if we go to that last paragraph of the counting of the Omer, we find that, 2 more pages. We find in this last paragraph of Ribono Shalom, as we say this whole paragraph, asking that God should cleanse us and should purify us, and we should accomplish all of those things that are supposed to be done spiritually and mystically through the counting of the Omer. We finally say the words, Shebizchut Tfiras Omer Shesafarti Hayom, and in the merit of the counting of the Omer that I counted today, Yusukan Mashe Pagamti, may God fix and rectify that area where I may be lacking or I may have stained Bisvira in regard to the attribute of, so on the first day we would add in the Sphira indicated below the Omer for that day, which is Chesed Shebechesed. The second day we would add in the words Gevura Shebechesed in those parentheses. And the third day we'd add in the words Tiferes Shebechesed. So that's how it's actually utilized. It's not just that we know what it represents, but it's also that we insert it into the prayer at that last paragraph. Beautiful. Okay, next question. As we look in the Siddur, let's look to the left. We have a Yud, we have an Elokim, and we have an Ana. What is that? On the second day, we have a Shin, and the word Yichaninu, and the word Bekoach. On the next day, we have a Mem, and we have Vivarchenu, and the word Gedulas. What is that all about? Well, in order to understand what it's all about, we really need to understand what those next paragraphs that we say are really all about. So let me show you as follows. I'm going to go back now to the page of here. After we finish counting the Omer, we say Hayom Yom, whatever the day is of the Omer. We then say the words Harachaman, the compassionate one, who yachzir lanu avodas beis hamikdash lemkoma. He should return us to the service in the beis hamikdash in his proper place. B'mheira v'yameinu, and may it be speedily in our days. Amen. Selah. Amen. And then we recite a few paragraphs. The first one is Lam Natseach B'neginos Mizmar Shir. This is a chapter of Tehillim, and in this chapter of Tehillim, it opens with the words Lam Natseach to the choir master and the songs. Okay. Now, this is, though, the word Elokim is where the paragraph really begins. From the word Elokim, Yechanenu Vivarchenu Ya'er Panav Itanu Selah. Okay, Ladas Ba'aretz Darkecha B'chol Goyim Yishuasecha. Let me show you something for a second, okay? Give me a second here. Look here for a moment. Elokim, Yechanenu, Vivarchenu, Ya'er, Panav, Itanu, Selah. Words sound at all familiar? They're actually the same words of that paragraph. What are they doing on the side over here? Allow me to explain. You see, this paragraph of Elokim, Yechanenu, Vivarchenu, the entire paragraph has 49 words. Okay? It has 7 verses. Each verse has 7 words. It has 49 words. The reason we say this paragraph at the end of the counting of the Sphira each night is because it's so connected to the concept of Sphira. We count Sphira and we count 49 nights, and each day represents one of 7. Everything is 1 in 7 weeks, 1 in 1 day of the week, 2 days of the week, 3 days of the week, and each thing is 7 within 7 and equals 49. So we recite the paragraph of Tehillim, which in fact has not only 49 verses, but 49 words, but 49 words divided into equally into 7 verses. So on the first night of the counting of the Omer, it corresponds to the first word in this verse, in this paragraph, Elokim. On the second night of the counting of the Omer, it also corresponds to word 2 in this chapter of Tehillim. So let's go look back now. And we see, oh my bad. The first night corresponds to Elokim. The second night it's telling you corresponds to Yechanenu. The next night it tells you corresponds to Vivarchenu. Good. Before we get to the next word, let's get to these big letters. If you look at the letter, there's a Yud on the first night, a Shin on the second night, a Mem on the third night, a Ches on the fourth night. You know what? Let's try that trick again. Read down. If you read down, it's forming words here. Yismechu. Yeah. Let's go to the next page. Rane. Nu. Le. Mim. Wow, it's forming words. What are those words all about? Well, why don't we take a look? You see, oh, I just missed it. It's in the middle, my luck. Okay. Whoever is unmuted, feel free to mute yourself unless you have a question. Okay. So if you look, one of the verses in this paragraph is as follows. Yismachu viranenu leumim ki sishpota mim mishar uleumim ba'aretz tanchem sela. It turns out that verse in the middle of a paragraph that has 7 verses, that each verse has 7 words, which means that it has 49 words in the whole paragraph, that verse has 49 letters in it. Sorry, give me 1 second here, please. Okay, that has 49 letters in it. So you have a verse with 49 letters, which means that every night of the Omer corresponds to another letter within that verse. The first night of the Omer corresponds to the Yud in the word Yismachu. Where are we? The Yud in the word Yismachu. The second night of the Omer corresponds to the Sin. The third night corresponds to the Mem. Let's go look back and let's see if it all adds up properly. Okay? Here we go. See? The first night is the Yud. The second night is the Sin. The next night is the Mem. The next night is the Ches. And just all together 49 letters in that pasuk. 49 nights. Each night corresponds to another one. And finally, that leads us to this word bekoach, this word anna, and then this word bekoach. What's that all about? Well, let's play the same game. Anna, bekoach, gedulas, yimincha, tatir, trura. That's starting to sound familiar. Does it sound familiar to anybody? Wait. Avad yisatz. Okay, you got me. Now I give up. Let's take a look. Let's go back to those paragraphs afterwards and see what we find. Okay. Not that page, but that page. We find that the next paragraph is Anna bekayach kedulas yamincha tatir trura. Sound familiar? Those are the words that we were saying. So let's see. Are you going to tell me this is another one of those things that has 7 lines and 7 words in each verse? Let's see. Let's count lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But the bottom one doesn't count. It's not really part of it. That's an added on thing. Interesting. Let's count words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Try the second one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, that's not going to add up because we have 7 lines, but only 6 words. That's 42. But let's see. You'll notice that in many Sidurim, this paragraph, by the way, is somewhat of a universal paragraph. It's very mystical. It's very beautiful. We're not going to discuss it right now. But this paragraph actually is recited in the morning davening as part of the karbanos, as part of the offerings. This paragraph is recited at night during Kriya Shema al Hamita. When we say the Shema before we go to bed, and all of the extra paragraphs in it, this is there too. This paragraph is found in a lot of places. It's found on Friday nights as part of the davening. It's found in a lot of places. Interestingly enough, if you take the first letter of each word, they add up to an acronym. And this acronym is Avag Yisatz, which we won't get into the mystical meaning of that. But if you look, it says right here in the instructions, when reciting Ana B'Koach, look at or visualize the divine names formed by the acronyms of the words as they appear on the left column, but don't say them. So these things here are actually divine names. Now, this one you might recognize, the second one. Look, Kabel Rinas Amcha, Sagbenu Taharenu Naira, which means Kuf Reish Ayin, Sin, Tes, Nun. Look at it here. Kuf Reish Ayin, Sin, Tes, Nun. That spells out Kra Satan, which is disturbed, the Satan, okay? Whenever we're saying prayers about someone who's very, very ill, we will often spell out their name from a chapter of Tehillim, which we'll talk about another time, and we'll spell out those words, Kra Satan, so as to disturb and disrupt and do away with the Satan, the Satan, okay? So those words spell out that acronym, and each of these acronyms are divine names of God and mean something holy and mystical. But if you have 6 words plus a divine name, which is the sum of its parts, that means you have a total of 7 things. 7 lines, 6 words and a divine name is 7, that's 49. Each night of the Omer represents one of these words. First night is Ana, second night is B'Koach, third night Gedulas, fourth Yamincha, fifth Tatir, sixth Trura, and 7 represents the acronym of the divine name. So when we go back one last time, we see exactly that. First night, Ana. Second night, B'Koach, Gedulas, Yamincha, Tatir, Trura, and then the acronym. And if I go to the next page, you'll see it continues. So in the end, when we count the Omer, there's a lot more going on over here. We have the day of the Omer. We have what it represents as it relates to the attribute we're working on. And as I said, that's a class in and of itself to understand what it means to work and what each of these attributes mean. We have the word in the paragraph of Tehillim, which has 49 words. We have the letter in that paragraph, which is of a verse of 49 letters. And it also, that first night also represents a word in the paragraph of Ana B'Koach, that mystical prayer. And we have all of that going on as we count the Omer. So as I said, just to do something a little bit different, since today was Lag BaOmer, I thought it would be nice to share something about the Omer as well, and to continue the class sitting in front of the cave that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai actually hid in. That is exactly the actual cave. Having said that, we will now continue on with the Chakras Prayer. So let's see where we left off. We left off, I believe we completed the morning blessings. And now we will just briefly touch upon the Karbanos, and that way next week, because we're not going to spend as much time on that, and then next week we'll get into the Psukei de Zimra, which will actually take us a couple of weeks to get through. Before we do that, just some things to know. Everything that we learned about in the morning blessings was to be said ideally at home. Now we're up to the part where you come to shul. Now when you come to shul, that's where you put on the talis and the tefillin. Let's go back a page here. First, we have the putting on of the talis. We put on the talis. I'll just discuss it briefly. If you want, you can turn. Well, first of all, it's interesting to note here that even though it shows you in the siddur that we put on the talis, and that's where the whole order of putting on the talis are these prayers, these blessings, followed by the blessings of the tefillin. Look at the instructions here. It is the Chabad custom to don the talis and tefillin, not here, but before the paragraph of Ezehu Mekoman on page 22. Look, now we're on page 10. Okay, that's the fact. So all of these prayers that we're now showing you are not actually said here. Even though when you go to most shuls, people come in, the first thing they do is they put on the talis and tefillin. It's not what happens in a Chabad shul. You go to a Chabad shul, and you'll see they take, as it says here, you take the talis, you stand with it folded over the right shoulder, with the 4 tzitzis in front of you, and you examine the tzitzis to make sure that none of them are torn. And while you're doing that, you then recite this paragraph of Baruchi Nafshi. Once you've completed it, then you put the talis on and wrap yourself in the talis and say the blessing of Lehisatef Batzitzis. Now, having said that, we don't actually do that here. What we do is we take our talis, we fold it over our shoulder, and then we start reciting many, many, many pages with that talis over our shoulder before we ever get to this paragraph and the blessing and the paragraph that's said afterwards. Okay? Now, the next thing in the siddur is going to be the putting on of the tefillin. We don't do that yet because we haven't put our talis on yet. So we're not going to actually put the tefillin on until we finish putting the talis on later on page 22. So with the talis still over my shoulder, now that I'm in shul, now I can start davening. The first prayer that I'm going to say upon entering the shul is going to be, ideally, not this first line. It will be the first line, but it should be matovu. Let me explain. The rabbis implemented that when you walk into shul, the first words that should come out of your mouth should be matovu ohalecha Yaakov. How good are your tents, Jacob? Mishkanosecha, your dwelling places, Israel. Where are we? We're in a shul. We're in a tent of meeting. So as we walk into this tent, this communal tent, it's appropriate to recite those words. What are those words from? Those words are originally words that were recited by Bilam. Bilam was the non-Jewish prophet that was hired by King Balak of the Moabite. King Balak of Moab hired Bilam to go and curse the Jewish people. And you know the famous story, Bilam was riding on his donkey, and then the donkey started to talk to him, right? And they had their whole argument. Anyway, the bottom line is, though, that every time Bilam attempted to curse the Jewish people, as he was hired to do by King Balak, words of blessings would come out. One of the words of blessings that came out of Bilam's mouth was, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanosecha Yisrael. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. Your dwelling place is Israel. What did he mean? He meant that the way most of the tribes who were encamped in different places set up their homes, where their tents all faced each other very, very close, and everybody could see from their window into the next window, and everybody could see everybody else's private lives going up. And the Jews had set up their tents in a way where they were back to back, and they would always find a way where one window didn't see into the next window, so that there was always privacy amongst the Jewish people, so that there was never such a concept of one Jew looking into the home of another Jew. And this was considered to be a great merit of the Jewish people. And the words that he wanted to curse came out as blessings of the Jewish people. The blessings, you say, so why do we want to start with blessings coming from some non-Jewish prophet who was actually trying to curse the Jewish people? Because on the contrary, this is the concept of Yisrein ha'or min ha'choshech. The greatest light is light that comes from the darkness. He came to curse the Jewish people, and God transformed his curses into blessings. There's no greater blessing than that. And so, when we enter a shul, those are the first words that come out of our mouth. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. Now, mind you, if you daven in an Ashkenaz shul, you'll find that this prayer, Matovu and Adon Olam, are in fact at the beginning of the siddur, and they're even before the Birchos HaShachar, the morning blessings that we just learned about. They have these words first, and then they have the morning blessings. Why? Because as I told you, in Nusach Ashkenaz, they recite the morning blessings in the shul. But they still want that when you enter the shul, you would recite Matovu. Well, in order to do that, they therefore have to put Matovu even before the morning blessings, because you're saying the morning blessings in the shul. We, who say the Birchas HaShachar, the morning blessings at home, we are able to recite the Matovu in its proper place, because the morning blessings are said at home. So now when we walk into Shul, we start with this Matovu. Now I keep talking about Matovu, but what about the line before it? So it says over here, it's proper to recite the following line before prayer. Before we even utter one word of prayer, there became a custom from many, many generations to recite this paragraph, these words of Hareini. What does it say? Let's read it. Hareini mekabel alai, I hereby take upon myself mitzvahs aseh, the positive commandment shall of v'yahavta l'reyacha kamocha, to love your fellow as yourself. Why? Why are we saying this here? Because as we attempt to enter into prayers to Hashem, we first acknowledge our love for a fellow Jew and our love for everyone else. And our prayers are not only for ourselves, but they're for everybody else as well. You know how it is when your kids are all fighting and one of them comes up and says, Dad, I want something. And you say, not now. Go make up with your brother, then we'll talk. We want to show Hashem we get along with each other. We have love for our fellow Jew. And that's the perspective that we want to be in when we start to beseech Hashem, when we start to ask Hashem with our prayers. And hence, we begin with this actual public declaration. I hereby take upon myself the mitzvah of Yahavta l'reyacha kamocha, to love your fellow as yourself. So let's understand that mitzvah. We know that that mitzvah of Yahavta l'reyacha kamocha is written in the Torah. As a matter of fact, we read it not in this past week's parsha, but the parsha before, Parshas Kedoshim. We said those words. Yahavta l'reyacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. What does it mean when it says reyacha, your neighbor? It means reyacha it's like a peer. It's someone who is in the similar situation as you, which means in this situation, it means your fellow Jew. Now, we have many, many obligations about how we have to treat every creation, how we have to treat every human. But we have greater obligations as to how we have to treat a fellow Jew. You say, why is that? That sounds racist. I don't know if the word is racist, but I would say as follows. It's important to discuss this, not only because it's the opening of davening, but also on this day of Lag BaOmer. This is the one statement that Rabbi Akiva would say. He said those words, V'yahavta l'reyacha kamocha. We're told Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This is the great foundation, the great generalistic law of all of Torah. So it's important to discuss. So what the first thing that we need to understand is as follows. That, in fact, reyacha, we have obligations. We have to be nice to everybody. But I ask you a question. Don't we all realize that we have greater obligations to family than we have to others? Certainly. We have greater obligations to our immediate family than we have to our extended family. The way we treat a spouse and a parent and children is greater than an obligation as to what we must go and do and go out of our way for, than even for a cousin and an uncle. And certainly greater even than a close friend. And certainly greater than a community member, etc. With each level which is further out from the immediate family, let's look at it the other way. With each member which is closer to the immediate family, we have a greater obligation of kindness and responsibility to that person. As Jews, we see each and every one of our co-religionists as family. We see each other as family, and every life counts, and every life matters. And every life in general matters, but it's 1,000-fold more when it comes to our people, when it comes to our very own, because this is family. And you know how you know it's family? You know it's family because you could be traveling anywhere in the world. But when you see another Jew, and especially if you identify and you walk around looking like a Jew, and you see another person that looks like a Jew, there's a connection there. There's an automatic understanding there that you and I, who have never met, will be there for each other in a way that nobody else can ever imagine. It's just a reality. You know, more than once in the last year, there was an El Al plane that had to make an emergency landing before Shabbos. One of them was actually El Al's fault, where They took off when they shouldn't have. The flight was delayed for many, many hours on the tarmac in New York. People started saying, turn back, because at this point, we're not going to land before Shabbos in Israel. And they wouldn't turn back. And finally, people were all standing up on the plane saying, we won't sit down, so you can't take off because you can't do this to us. We cannot be flying on Shabbos. We cannot land on Shabbos. So finally, the pilot made an announcement, and he said, okay, if everybody takes your seats, I'll be able to return to the gate. Everybody took their seats, and he took off. And there was a riot on the plane. And it was first reported in the news that the Orthodox Jews were, I mean, again, nobody got physically hurt, but they were yelling and screaming, and it was very, very out of control on the plane. And they're blaming the Orthodox Jews when the reality is the guy never should have taken off. Once they were in flight, they realized that it's really a problem. They cannot do this to everybody on the plane. There's another problem, which is Israel can't really allow them to land because Israel has a law that doesn't allow a plane to land on Shabbos. Now what? So they figured out that they would have enough time to get to, I can't even remember which island it is. Maybe it's in Greece. I don't even remember where it is anymore. But what are you going to do? They're going to land them there and they're going to dump them for Shabbos. What is a plane filled with Jews and most of them Orthodox going to do? So one of the people on the plane who was a real community leader in Israel took over, calmed everyone. They allowed him to speak with the pilots. He said, listen, we need to get the Israeli government involved now, and we need to call Chabad. And they did. They called Chabad of, I just for some reason can't remember what city it was. I'm pretty sure it was someplace in Greece. But they called Chabad, and the Israeli government made arrangements with Chabad and let them know that in however many hours a plane's going to be landing, and they secured a hotel, and the people landed. Now, mind you, this Chabad normally has, whatever they have, 40 people for a Shabbos meal that they normally have, which is amazing. The Rabbi and Rebbitzin made arrangements for someone to take care of their shul and their normal stuff. And they made arrangements to have, they hired a staff and they cooked for, it must have been 200 and something people. And they went to near the airport and they stayed in the hotel together with where all the people were going to be staying. They helped arrange rooms. They had everything set because from the time the people landed until Shabbos started, they had an hour maybe. And they helped arrange it all. And they had a shul set up and they had a public dining room set up. And they had Shabbos meals set up for them. They had everything these people needed. Why? Because Jews needed help and were going to be stranded in a strange place. And it's not the only time. It happened in Newfoundland. It happens. And there are times, it could be there are so many amazing stories where a Jew is stranded and another Jew reaches out and says, here, let me help because of who we are. That's the Hatzolah kamocha. Another understanding of looking at kamocha is a beautiful, beautiful explanation. Kamocha means like yourself. How can I love someone like myself? I have a lot of self-love. There's one level that we can accomplish it. You see, the nature of a person is, I do things I shouldn't do. But when I do things I shouldn't do, I don't judge. I don't want to judge. Who am I to judge? Because probably the reason I did the stuff I didn't do is because of my upbringing, because I was in a bad mood, but there's a lot of excuses as to why I may have done anything, which is less than what I should have done. So I'm not quick to judge myself. I'm very forgiving of myself in case I did something wrong, and I can rationalize and find good excuses and good reasons for what I may have done. But when somebody else does something that is inappropriate or wrong, can I judge them? He's such a this and she's such a that, and how lacking that person may be. We need to be the opposite. On the contrary, I do something I shouldn't do. I shouldn't have done it. I really shouldn't have done it. That's the fact. When I do something I shouldn't do, I should be a little bit more judgmental. I should feel bad. I should find not an excuse. I should find a way of moving forward, a way of regretting, a way of tshuva. But when I see somebody else do something wrong, I should treat them like my nature treats me. My nature is to say, I'm a good guy. I see somebody do something they shouldn't. I should immediately let that instinct kick in and say, she's a good person. He's a good person. There's a good reason why they may have done so. And I shouldn't judge them. Kamocha means be as forgiving for others as you are for yourself. That's the nature and the meaning of Yahavta l'reacha kamocha. And that connects our morning davening to our entire concept of Lag BaOmer. So for today, as I had mentioned, today was going to be a class not only about davening, but it was also going to be a class with what I said was a touch of Lag BaOmer as well. And this connects it very much. Also, as I said today, we covered more really about the counting of the Omer than we did about the Chakras. Let's just take a quick look at Chakras and see where we're up to. Hold on, please. So what we're going to start with really for next week, and then we'll end on another concept that I mentioned at the beginning. For next week, we will quickly go through the Matovu and Adon Olam and the Karbanos, and that will take us, and the offerings, and that will lead us into the Psuki de Zimra, the verses of song, and Baruch Sha'amar. And when we get to that part, we're going to find yet another very vast difference between the Nusach of Ashkenaz as opposed to the Chabad Siddur and the Nusach Sfard. And we will find, again, the logic behind why each Siddur is set up based on the way they done. I will also answer a question that was asked last week and the week before about that bracha of She'asani Kirtzono. We had talked about the blessing that men say, which, by the way, women don't say the bracha. We talked about the last three blessings of Shelo Asani Goy. God didn't make me a non-Jew. Shelo Asani Abed. God didn't make me a slave. And Shelo Asani Isha. God didn't make me a woman. The combination there is that all three of those people are not obligated in mitzvahs. And me, a man, instead of saying, I wish I had it easier, I wish I was born like a woman on a higher level. No, I relish, or what's the word, relic? In the fact of, I revel in the fact of, I have to work harder, I have to do mitzvahs. Beautiful. A woman doesn't say that bracha. She doesn't say, thank you, God, for not making me a woman. She is a woman. Of course she doesn't say that bracha. Many say the bracha, blessed are you, God, she'asani kirtzono, that he made me according to his will. It's not in the Chabad Siddur. Someone asked why. The question is not why isn't it in the Chabad Siddur. The question is why is it in the other Siddur? Why do I say that? Because all of those blessings in that entire series, we ourselves looked at together. We saw them all in the Gemara. We saw that the Gemara discusses each and every one of those blessings. We looked through the part in Gemara Brachas. We didn't look in the part in Gemara Menachos, but I showed it to you. I told you that it's taken from the Gemara as well. The bracha she'asani kirtzono is not found anywhere in the Gemara. It's not even found amongst the Gaonim. So without that source, the Alter Rebbe did not include it in the Siddur. There is a source to it, and there are different opinions as to what the source actually is, and there are many communities who have it as a tradition. There are even some households within Chabad who had this as a family tradition to say the bracha, and those that have the tradition should say so. It was asked amongst the Rabbeim, did their mother say it? Didn't they say it? The general consensus seems to be that within the house of the Rebbes and their wives, that was mostly not said. And as I said, we see it's not included in the Siddur, and that's primarily because it doesn't come from the same source as all of those blessings come from. Having said that, I had mentioned at the beginning that there was this beautiful event, a 24-hour event about Hatzolah. Hatzolah being the Jewish paramedics. If you want to have an understanding of what is the Ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself, you need to understand what is Hatzolah. Hatzolah is the Jewish Rescue Service. It does exist in Los Angeles. It even exists in North Hollywood. It has not made it yet to the West Valley. The reason it doesn't exist here in reality is because it requires a tremendous amount of resources and people, because if it's not reliable, it can't be at all. It has to be, you make that call and you can completely rely on it. In New York, if God forbid there's a medical emergency, they do not call 911. They call Hatzolah. Every single child knows the phone number to Hatzolah. It's posted on every milk carton. It's posted on every phone. I don't happen to know it because I don't live in New York. It doesn't matter where in New York you live. It's one number. And in each city, they have a number for Hatzolah. You call Hatzolah and they respond. How do they respond? There's one basic dispatch place. When you call and you say the location, they immediately call it out on the radios, on the channel of that neighborhood. In Crown Heights, there are 75 volunteer Hatzolah members. That's 75 people who are either EMTs or paramedics. Most of them are EMTs. The few leading ones are paramedics. Okay, every one of them wears a radio. They have the radio. they're not necessarily all constantly on duty, especially on Shabbos. There are some who at times may be off duty, but even on Shabbos, they're on duty and they wear a radio on Shabbos and carry it even without an Erev, as has been discussed with Rabbanim. When the call goes out on the radio that there's a person in need of medical attention and the address is given, you hear it on the radio, you look where you are, and if you think you're close enough, you simply say, unit, everyone has a unit number, unit so-and-so responding. They will always have at least 2 units that respond to any medical emergency. And wherever you are, you jump in your car, or more often than not, you run downstairs because you're in the same apartment building, you run next door, you run down the block because it's such a small, confined area where everybody lives. Whereas the paramedics' response time in LA, they claim to be 6 minutes, and it's not. I can tell you for a fact it's not. It's closer to 10 minutes. The average response time, the documented response time is 2 minutes for Hatzolah. The anecdotal response time is 90 seconds. 90 seconds from you make that call and somebody is knocking on your door with a medical bag. Because everybody lives near everybody, and somebody hears the call, says, I'm responding, drops what he's doing, leaves his Shabbos meal, leaves his Pesach Seder, leaves Shul on Rosh Hashanah, leaves whatever it is that he's doing, and goes to respond to the call. This is, and every Hatzolah member is a volunteer. They do not make 10 cents for doing this. The only people who maybe get paid are the people who are hired to be dispatchers, but I'm not even sure that's true. I don't even know. I don't know that much about it. The fact is, this is simply done out of Ahavas Yisrael. It was put together because the paramedics in New York in the 1960s and 70s were completely unreliable. And Jews were dying because, for example, when paramedics were called to Crown Heights for a heart attack victim on New Year's Eve, and the ambulance driver came and he was drunk and couldn't deal with it and got into a fight with the family, and the guy died on the way to the hospital, that, amongst other things, is when Rabbi Bistritsky, we all know Rabbi Shlomo Bistritsky, well, his father of blessed memory said, that's it. We will have to do something about this. And he founded the Hatzolah of Crown Heights. And he's from the founding members of Hatzolah. He said, we will have to take matters into our own hands. And he did. And from that point forward, Jews dedicate themselves. I have a nephew who's in Hatzolah. I have many close friends who are in Hatzolah. They go, they take the long course to be an EMT or even a paramedic. And they jump. Whenever a Jew is in trouble, they go and they respond selflessly. And it's an incredible testimony to what Ahavas Yisrael is, to what it means that every one of us is precious to every one of us. It's just an unbelievable thing. My daughter had a situation on a Friday afternoon a few years ago where she cut her finger very, very badly. And it was right before Shabbos. She called Hatzolah. They came running over. They saw it. They said, you must go to the hospital. And it was going to be something where she was going to have to be there for a while, and she would need to have her husband with her. She had 3 little babies at home, and they said, is there anyone who could take them? And she said, I have a cousin who lives around the corner. They took her kids to her cousin's house and dropped them off there, okay, while somebody else took them to the hospital. And then the Hatzolah member, now it's already minutes before Shabbos, didn't say I have to get home for Shabbos, stayed with her for 2 hours in the hospital, making sure that she would see not just the doctor, but the right doctor, because he knows the doctors in the hospital. This is what's known as Ahavas Yisrael. Having said that, one can only imagine what it's like during this horrible coronavirus. Literally, they're running in circles from person to person. I spoke to a close friend, and I'm going to show you a video, and my friend's father is actually on this video. And not only that, but Rabbi Brisky from Agura, his nephew, Menachem Brisky's son, Eli Brisky, who grew up here in the valley, is one of the Hatzolah members. My friend told me that his father's life was saved by this young man because literally they, when necessary, kept him out of the hospital, because once a person went to the hospital there in some of the places in New York, it was over. And you had Hatzolah members running around, giving oxygen to people and checking on people. They were doing rounds, just driving circles around Crown Heights, checking on every single person. So I'm going to show you a short video. It's a 6-minute or 7-minute video very quickly, and then we'll say goodbye. But it's just a really beautiful video. And I think it's important for us to really see and get an amazing understanding of what Ahavas Yisrael truly is. So give me a moment. That's not it. That's it. 1 minute. Try it one more time. Some of you may have seen it. If you did, forgive me, but it's really, really worth seeing.
It's available for Montgomery and Albany. And units of Crown Heights for Maple and Kingston for a 65-year-old severe disc breather.
Reality started sinking in that this is something much more serious than anyone had thought.
And we were literally just going from one call to the next. And I remember there was one afternoon, it just was absolute chaos.
Are there any CH units available for Lefferts and Albany for a patient with a low 2 SAT? For a patient possibly not breathing, do we have any units heading to Maple and Kingston? Put a rush aid response. Any medics?
It was emotional for them. Like, they were tearing up, they were crying. I mean, these were their friends, their family members.
First and foremost, Eberster, thank you. Secondly, Hatzolah.
Part of the healing is the support you feel, and when you see people really, really care, it just makes all of the difference.
And units in Crown Heights for Crown and Troy for a 78-year-old. H-base calling Crown Heights 904. What is your ETA back to the Crown Heights area? You're the only bus available. Please try to put a rush on it.
We were the first neighborhood where there was widespread community dissemination of the disease. I asked the Hatzolah coordinators to call all the members to a meeting, which we did on the phone, preparing the members for the onslaught that was about to occur and trying to make some rules of engagement as regards what was about to happen.
The normal Hatzolah volume in Crown Heights is about 7-8 calls a day. As the pandemic hit, that started to increase until it reached a point where it was 10 times the normal call volumes. Hatzolah of Crown Heights was just being hit with call after call after call with no respite. So we took the dispatching from normal Hatzolah dispatchers and started to dispatch from Crown Heights itself, and I think we did a very good job with that.
Calls were coming in fast and furious.
I remember just driving down the streets of Crown Heights, going from one call to the next, and literally just every block you saw members' cars, double parked with their lights flashing, and it was like a real realization of what we were going through at that moment.
Couldn't get air in my lungs and feeling complete short of breath. My wife and I decided we should call Hatzolah, and that was really the first part of intervention of Hatzolah with my situation.
Even though they were not critically ill, these were patients that had just begun with the illness. This was now in a different situation where Hatzolah members were being asked by the hospitals not to bring the patients to the hospital, and therefore we had to develop a way to make sure that patients were safe. The Hatzolah members played an incredible and a critical role in maintaining the well-being of patients at home.
Much of the time we were working with a staff that was reduced by perhaps 50% in many cases. A lot of the stuff that we use in a typical period would last perhaps 6 months was flying off the shelves in 24 hours.
When our own members started going down too, and they started needing Hatzolah, and they started getting transported to the hospital, that's when I think it really just hit home, how bad the situation was.
When my health deteriorated, it was decided that it would be better that I go to the hospital. And they made sure that I was transported in time so that it wouldn't become a riskier transport.
About an hour after I got home, there was a ring on our doorbell. A beautiful young man came in with an oxygen machine and a pulse oximeter from Hatzolah. And he's like, we just want to make sure it's here in case you need it.
Members went and essentially carried out the function of an army of nurses making sure that all patients were okay of the Yom Tovim.
I had a visit from my private Hatzolah member that lives down the block. He would come in, check me out, make sure everything is okay. Baruch Hashem, I kept on getting stronger and better, and by the time Yom Tov came to an end, I was released from their care, and they moved on to help other people.
All I can say is that Hatzolah was wonderful.
We were actually really glad that we got him that he left the hospital and he was able to be treated at home, and Hatzolah was there, set him up with oxygen, whatever he needed, and kind of made a little hospital for him and took care of him as if he were in a hospital.
Getting follow-ups and really, really, really caring. It's not just an ambulance service. It's beyond that. It's real Bikkur Cholim in the ultimate.
Over Pesach, I did a lot of the house calls to a lot of patients that were recovering from COVID or patients that were in the middle of COVID. And I was able to, in a way, give them that chizuk that, I went through it. Baruch Hashem, I got better. And I was able to, I'm back on my feet. I'm back being able to help other people.
Just people are willing to do whatever it takes to help one another. You just really see the achdus, and it's just like mind-blowing.
The Hatzolah members themselves, impossible to describe how incredible they were to just jump in there and do what was needed, not seeing their family sometimes for the entire day, not eating, not davening. It was just something to behold, incredible.
I definitely feel like all the wives in Hatzolah really deserve tons of credit for doing what they did, and you're running out all the time, so there's no break. She's really on her own.
It made me just incredibly proud to be a part of this incredible organization.
Being a patient and being a caregiver, I can say that I'm really proud to be a member of the community and lucky to have the Hatzolah members that took care of me.
Anyway, we'll stop there, but I think you get a basic idea of what it's all about. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what Avas Yisrael is. This is v'ahavta l'reacha kamecha. And we should be proud to know that this exists all over the world, and that there exists the concept of every Jew is always ready to look out for another one of us. And we must recognize that, and we must remember that, and realize that that is our strength. And that is the strength that God gives us to keep us going, especially in these difficult times. Having said that, are there any questions regarding tonight's class, which was off the beaten path and more like Omer oriented, but still davening oriented? Any questions? No. Yes.
Yes, there is a question.
Okay.
I came in slightly late, and the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, yes, that one, where is that actually located?
I'm not exactly sure. I just found the picture online. Didn't have time to look it up.
Oh, okay.
But I'll look it up.
Thank you. It was a wonderful class, and you explained a lot that I did have questions on, and you answered them. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I very much appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
When people are buried in a cave, are they actually buried, or were they put on a shelf, or do you know any information about this?
I presume that when people were buried in a cave, they were actually buried, but rather than it just being in the ground out in the sun, it's in a cave where other people could come in and be able to visit with shelter. That's my guess, but I would imagine they're buried.
It is true.
Buried under the ground, yes.
It is true. We saw Chana and her 7 sons buried over in Tzfat. And so we went there. We went to the kever there, and they are buried in the ground. And there's a lot of people who placed candles there, stones there, in the cave. They were in the cave.
Very nice.
So they're buried in a cave.
Okay, I'm going to unmute everybody now so we can all say goodbye. Feel free to show your face, please. Once again,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi Greene.
Thank you, Rabbi Greene.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Greene. Great lecture. Thank you. How about the song, Rabbi Greene?
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Greene.
Great last night.
Bye,
Rabbi Greene.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. It was really good.
It was very interesting. That mystical stuff with the codes and the down the columns, and that was really something to think about.
I'll just make mention, as I just muted everybody, that tomorrow night Rabbi Ari has a class at 8 p.m. We have our Pirkei Avos class on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Rabbi Morty has his class Saturday night at 9:15. And stay tuned. We're putting together a beautiful online program for before Shavuos. It may involve some cooking and recipes and possibly some cheesecake. So we'll keep you informed, and hopefully we'll know more about that very, very soon. Also, I'll just make mention, and then I'll unmute. For those that were there last night, in the end, I did actually have that Western burger, and it was unbelievable. I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Yes, good singing last night, Rabbi Greene.
Thank you very much.
The cooking show.
You got a what? You got a Western burger from Jeff's?
No. Last night at our kumzit, we did a barbecue demonstration.
Okay.
And together, I made the hamburger, and my wife made homemade onion rings and Western sauce. And put together the entire burger, and it was unbelievable. It was just a true Western burger that we made on our own as part of the kumzit or the kumzit from last night.
The cooking class, and Yochanan made those s'mores.
Yes,
and the way you guys explained everything and showed everything, it could have been on TV, a regular TV. It was great.
We tried our best with the limitations of a laptop and a phone. We tried our best to turn it into a television show.
It was wonderful.
All right, we'll see you all. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.